It didn't start with you. It can end with you. Many of us feel like we're carrying something that doesn't belong to us. I hear that all the time. This isn't mine. So we can begin experiencing a fear or a symptom that strikes suddenly or unexpectedly. It's almost like an ancestral alarm clock that buzzes when we hit that certain age. How do we tell if it's inherited?
Mark Wolynn is a leading expert in inherited family trauma and is the author of the international bestseller, It Didn't Start With You.
The healing we do extends backward, extends forward. It's almost as though what's unresolved from the past sends the energy of the trauma, the contraction forward to heal, because it's looking to heal. Once we do our inner work and we heal, that epigenetic signature no longer passes forward to the next generation.
Can you give a starting place to somebody that's feeling the pain, they're stuck in that cycle? What would be the first sign, Mark, that someone is carrying a wound from their lineage? How does someone actually heal generational trauma on a high level?
You know, I'm going to start sort of two directions. We don't know if it's generational trauma. We don't know. And we don't know if it's attachment trauma. As you know what I did in my book, this chapter is about attachment. This chapter is about generational trauma. And we really can't tell because in the body, it's felt the same. You know, we have fight, flight, freeze responses that we either have inherited through the sperm cell from our father, the egg cell from our mother. And we're just born this way with reactivity, fears, feelings that we don't get. So that's one version of it. But then we can be wounded deeply in early childhood, have no memory of it because it happens before the age of 3, before memory comes online, and it reacts the same way. So we can have fight, flight, freeze responses, fight, tight, prepare for a threat, push away, you know, that feeling of in our body, that elevation of energy, fight response, or a flight response, get me out of here. You know, we often leave, we contract or leave through our back, or a freeze response. We disconnect, we feel numb, we shut down, we feel empty, hollow, disappeared inside. So all of that can feel the same. And people don't know if it's, hey, is this coming from generational or is it coming from attachment until we dig behind the curtain. You know, we pull the curtain back and start to ask certain questions. Now, to answer your question, how we heal, we've got to reach that place inside. For years, people say, we've got to do your inner child work, hold a teddy bear or put your hand on your body. But, you know, where does that inner child, where do those, another name for inner child would be our fight, flight, freeze responses. So where do they land in our body and where can they integrate? For me, what that means is they have to integrate beneath the superficial feelings of tight or pull away. You know, we've got to be able to hang out in those feelings enough until we can reach what's beneath them. The pulsing, the tingling, the expanding, the softening, the feeling of particles or waves or flow, you know, because that's what really lives in the body. Yet many of us can't even go there because the fight, flight, freeze responses are so strong that we feel it and then we avoid the sensation of it. If it doesn't feel good. So we go into our head or we disconnect from our body. So in order to heal, I would say the first thing we need to do is stay with what's uncomfortable. And then the second thing, until we can reach what's beneath, which is the natural, I'm going to use the word divine essence because I don't know what to call it, but the expanded core, our divine essence, our flowing energy field. You know, it's different for everybody, but be able to live in our core where we have expanded feelings of life force. And that's where we integrate the fight, flight.
I love that you talked about the deciphering period where, you know, what's being felt, in my opinion, even if it's not being said, it's still being felt. Yet on one side there would be trauma, on the other side there would be inherited. What would be the first sign, Mark, that someone is carrying a wound from their lineage?
Now that's tricky, but I love the question and I love to answer it because there are definitely telltale signs. Let me widen the context just for a second. So many of us feel like we're carrying something that doesn't belong to us. I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
This isn't mine. That's where I came up with the title of the book. It didn't start with you, but it can end with you. So we feel like we're carrying a fear and we can't place it, or a sadness or a grief, or we're struggling with a health condition or panic attacks, chronic exhaustion, autoimmune illness. So yes, that can be true. But again, we don't know if that's inherited, or we don't know if that's the effect of a broken attachment with our mom, which I'm sure we'll get into as we keep talking.
Yeah.
But how do we tell if it's inherited? So I've discovered that there are definitely these signs. So we can begin experiencing a fear or a symptom that strikes suddenly or unexpectedly. For example, when we reach a certain age, all of a sudden everything's going well. We're 30 years old, we hit 30, and all of a sudden we look at our partner and she or he doesn't do it for us anymore. We don't understand it. Why are we shutting down? Because if we followed age 29, 30, 31 in the family history, we might see that our grandmother or grandfather was widowed at that age and never met anyone else. They stayed alone.
Yeah.
Or our parents separated at age 30, unconnected. They don't make the link. So let's go with that. Grandma, she's widowed at 30. She never marries again. And mom, her daughter, doesn't make the connection, but at 30, she is pulling away energetically from our dad. And then she stays alone, or she has relationships that don't amount to anything. And then all of a sudden, it's almost like an ancestral alarm clock that buzzes when we hit that certain age. We at 30 start to lose interest in our partner. So it's not just ages. That's just one. It's also milestones or events in our life. For example, we get married and, everything's cool. Life is great. But now that we're married, we shut down and we can't explain it. So it wasn't the age necessarily in that case, although I'm going to use the same example. Age 30, if it happened before, or just getting married. I remember I worked with this woman. It was an amazing story. She loves her fiance, best guy in the world. She can't wait to marry him. But she marries him and she's in my office and she says, I feel trapped and disgusted by him. I go, whoa, back up. You mean a couple months ago, he was the cat's meow. And now that you're married, you feel disgusted and trapped. She goes, yeah, when he goes to touch me, I feel disgusted. So, of course, that sounds systemic. That sounds generational. So I asked her to tell me about her mom and her dad. And she goes, well, let's go before my mom. My mom was in love with her high school sweetheart, totally in love with this guy. And they're going to get married. But the guy says, look, I got to go out of town for a bit, but I'll come back for you. Well, he does come back, but she didn't believe it. So she hooks up with my client's father and gets pregnant. Now the guy comes back and says, I'm ready to, and she goes, oh, but I'm pregnant. And he bails. He just says that, and this is the love of her life. And he bails. Now she does the right thing and marries the client's father, which is the right thing in this case. However, she feels trapped and disgusted every time he makes love to her. You see the connection. So all of a sudden, the daughter in the next generation, she's cool till she gets married. And then she's aligning with that systemic energy of feeling trapped and disgusted.
There's so many layers here. And I was in the studio this morning and I was just feeling into this principle that I'm sure you've come across. You and I have never talked about this before. So this is the first time I think we're exploring it together. The Native American 7th generation principle. And Native Americans say that when you heal in your current lifetime, that there's a ripple that's created, Mark, and it's not just created forward, it's created backward. And this is the, I guess you could say, universal fabric in which we're all operating from that you've described as the previous situation with the mother and the cheating and all these things. Earlier, you mentioned the dovetail on this is perfect. Earlier, you mentioned about the break in the bond with the mother. I had highlighted, if you're watching on YouTube and Spotify, this is Mark's book here that's on the screen. And I had highlighted this part, and I think it's a perfect time to read it. You said, sometimes the break in the bond isn't physical. Sometimes we experience more of an energetic break from our mother. She may be physically present, but emotionally distant or inconsistent. The presence of constant that the mother establishes during the first 5 years of life is instrumental for the child's psychological and emotional well-being. Can you extrapolate that from, yes, the first 5 years are important, but what about the epigenetic signature that's happening from that break in the bond, the lack of presence that ripples out into this seventh generation principle? To me, this is the fabric in which we operate.
So I'm going to answer that in pieces. So yes, the healing we do extends backward, extends forward. It's almost as though what's unresolved from the past sends the energy of the trauma, the contraction forward to heal, because it's looking to heal.
Yeah.
It's almost as if it sits in our laps to do our inner work so we can bring peace to what came from behind and what will come forward. In fact, there are many studies, I'm sure we'll get into this, where once we do our inner work and we heal, that epigenetic signature no longer passes forward to the next generations, which this is science. I mean, I can quote the studies when we get into it, but let me answer the next part of your question. So you read a passage of my book, and ultimately, I look for the first 10 years, the first decade of life, I'm looking at attachment. So I know I said there 5, the younger is more intense when these breaks happen before 5. But an attachment break can go all the way to age 10. And so I'm looking in that whole first decade. And then you said something else when you read the passage, that sometimes our mother's connection is there physically, but not emotionally, not energetically.
Yeah.
And this is massive. And I do want to take time with you here and talk about this. So many of us have a mother who is flatlined, emotionally flatlined, or she's very matter of fact. She's not bad. It's nothing bad at all, but it doesn't match the energy, the child energy of exuberance and joy and pain. So, whatever the child's feeling in his or her freedom, if the mother can't energetically mirror that back and match that, the child then feels unseen, not known, not soothed. And that's one of the questions that I'll ask people. In fact, Josh, if you said, Mark, if you were only allowed to ask one question to your patient, your client, what question would it be? I go, great, I have that question. It would be, and I'll ask it to the audience. Did you feel seen by your mom? Really seen? Did you feel known by her, that she could intuit what you needed and give it to you? And then she could soothe you when you were terrified or afraid, that she could hold you and soften you, and you felt nurtured and you could go to her for care. So did you feel seen, known, and soothed? And 90% of the people will say, no. Very simply, Josh,
Yeah.
They'll just say, no, I didn't feel that. That is a big T, and I'm making a big T in the video. That is a big T trauma, when we didn't feel seen, known, or soothed. Now, there's other reasons for it, other than our mother was flatlined or matter of fact. She could have been stressed. She could have been distracted. In utero, there could have been a baby that died before, and then she, during this time of gestation, when we're in the womb, she's going, oh no, what if this baby doesn't make it? What if this baby dies? Oh my gosh, I don't feel her kicking. There could be an energy of cortisol, because she's worried, she's in fear. And so the fetus reaching up to feel the mother's connection can't do so, Josh, because
Mm.
it's a swirl of cortisol. So we even have to look at events starting after conception. Okay, you've got me on so many lines here, Josh,
I
but
love it.
one of them is the heartbeat starts within 20 days for the fetus. And then the neural tube and the neural groove, that which will become the nervous system, that's 20 to 30 days. So basically, the fetus, not cognitive, but somatically aware of its surroundings, no memory, of course. But there's a sentience that this time in the womb is so important, which I know you guys were really in tune with your babies. So you knew how important that was. So I just want to announce it here to the listener. Oh my gosh, this time during a pregnancy, the attunement, if we can, needs to be as potent, if not even more potent, when the baby arrives. So if we're stressed, somebody's drinking or cheating, or we think we're going to break up, or we're not sure we're going to keep the baby, or the miscarriage beforehand, all of that's important. And those questions are on my website, they're in my book. And then once we're born, those first 3 years where we really don't have any memory, massively important. And then what are the events that happen? I always ask people when I'm working with them, what do you think your mom was feeling or thinking when she was pregnant with you? Was she even married? Were you pregnant out of wedlock? Did she want to have a baby? Was she excited? Was she feeling fearful? Did she like your dad? Did she feel trapped? Were they going to stay together? Did they stay together just because of the pregnancy? So all these questions are massively important. And then all the questions up to age 10. Did they go on an early vacation? Was she hospitalized? Were you hospitalized? Did she go away for school? Were your mom and dad fighting a lot? Was she stressed? Was someone cheating? Affairs? I could go on and give 100, but I think I've given enough of the events because her attunement is key. I do say this in the book, but I like to say this. Our mother installs the software for well-being or lack of well-being, because our brain during our time in utero and for the first 2 years of life is being wired for safety or lack of safety, for calm and trust or hypervigilance and threat. So during this time, mom's attunement needs to be pretty keen.
The beautiful part about everything you're mentioning is that, and by the way, if you're on YouTube, this is the workbook here. So incredible workbook where you can tactically and practically unpack a lot of what you're sharing, Mark. The workbook just got refreshed and I believe published at the end of 25, right?
Well, the workbook is brand new. So
brand new.
Really quick. I went to my publisher a year and a half and goes, I've got to update the book. He goes, no, the book's a bestseller. Don't touch it. I said, I'm sorry. There's all this new science with humans and I want to put it in the book. Plus my insights are different 10 years later. So I gutted it. It's a new book. Sorry, y'all. If you have the last version, please get the new one. I gutted it and it's about 30% new material. All the new studies with humans, with things we're learning also that inherited trauma, generational trauma can extend out for 5 years, not 3 years. But anyway, then while I was in there, I said, and I can't work with everybody in the world. So I want to write a workbook, and they were game. So the workbook is brand new and the revised edition is brand new. They just came out.
The reason that I'm sharing that book with everyone visually is because I think what happens, and I know I felt this earlier in my development, we interviewed first in 2017, again in 2019, and now here we are in 26. And I am a fundamentally different person because part and parcel of your work and the 900 people that I've interviewed in 11 years. And I reflect back on this earlier version of Josh, Mark, where I've done the work. I mean, I've gone through, my wife did your course. I've gone through your material. This is something that has drastically impacted the way in which I show up. But the way in which I show up is really just an amalgamation of my awareness. I think a lot of times people get scared, Mark. They feel fear around going into the depths of their emotions, going into the depths of the intergenerational strings, if you will, because they feel like they might get stuck. They feel like there's no map. And the beauty of your work that I so love is that you've not just created a theory, but it's an actual map to guide someone from what they're feeling to the changes that they seek. And I think the beauty of this, and the next question for you is, the beauty of this is that none of us are broken. None of us are inherently stuck. We just have energy and motion, emotion, that is trapped. And this energy just wants to be released. It just wants some reprieve. So guide us through this again, the scientific aspect, because I love the science of this. I remember on one of our episodes, you talked about the cherry blossom study, which I have quoted probably 20 times with different guests. And I've talked about your work, but you switched me on to this cherry blossom study a long time ago. Can you share on a high level this cherry blossom study and how it relates to the way that trauma passes through generations?
So that's what he did in the first book. All we had was mouse studies, and we didn't have the human studies. Now we do, and I'll talk about those as well. But this study was so potent. Thank you for liking it. I like it too. So they take male mice, and they make the male mice afraid of the certain scent, a cherry blossom scent. Every time the mice will smell it, they'll shock them. So so now the mice are showing epigenetic changes right in the first generation that are shocked. So their brains have enlarged areas where there's a greater amount of smell receptors, so they can detect the scent at even lesser concentrations, thereby protecting themselves. That's in the first generation. But what they're doing is they're passing down through so they take some of the sperm from the male mice that have been shocked, and then they impregnate female mice that haven't been shocked. It's clean slate over here, and they impregnate, and then they look at the progeny, the offspring of the second generation, and these mice became jumpy and jittery when they smelled the scent. They also had the physical alterations, these chemical alterations, which we'll get into, in the brain, blood, and sperm. But what was crazy is in the third generation, just by smelling the scent, these mice became jumpy and jittery, and if they were 2 generations beyond the actual trauma. So, you're asking me about the science, and it's really a good question. I think maybe I'll just talk about how it all happens. So when we have a trauma, literally it changes us. Literally it causes a chemical change in our DNA. And this can change how our genes function, sometimes for generations. So technically there's this trauma. Now there's chemical signals in our cells. They call them chemical tags, epigenetic tags. But the main thing is they attach to the DNA, and they tell the cells to use or ignore certain genes, enabling us to better deal with this trauma that just happened. So the way our genes are affected will change how we act or how we feel or how we react. So we can become, for example, reactive or very sensitive to situations that are similar to this trauma, even if this trauma occurred in a previous generation. I'm going to give an example here because it'll be relatable, because many of our grandparents experienced war. So if your grandparents came from a war-torn country, people are being shot, bombs are going off, uniformed men are lining people up in the square, people are being taken away, like is what's happening now in the world. Our grandparents could develop and pass forward a skill set with both positive and negative characteristics. So the positive, they could pass on sharper reflexes or quicker reaction times, reactions to the violence, to help them survive, and ultimately us in the next couple generations survive this trauma that was experienced. Here's the problem. They can also pass forward a stress response with the dial set to 10. And here we are born 2 generations later with this feeling of hypervigilance, this feeling of we hear a loud noise. We're at a cocktail party and somebody drops a glass and we dive under the couch. And, what are we doing with this response to war? We just think we're wired this way. We don't make the link that our anxiety, our hypervigilance, our depression can be connected with our parents and our grandparents.
It's profound because I remember in your book you were sharing, I believe it was in your 30s or 34, that you had essentially lost vision. And this is quite profound because I believe it's part of the fuel as to why you do what you do. I believe in your late 50s now, so this is quite some time ago. And I think about
50s. Let's go late 60s, buddy.
Late 60s. Okay, good. The challenge that is hard for people to understand that I'd love for you to provide clarity on is this one aspect. Through your own journey of essentially healing your vision by doing the deeper emotional epigenetic work, you were able to create a new reality for yourself. And I was just at Confluence, which is an event here outside of Austin, and there was someone speaking about exactly what you're describing, where we can actually heal when we start to feel. And I know this is a very reductionistic lens. We've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast, but I have come to the understanding, and I'm curious if you can juxtapose this to your story about losing the vision and regaining the vision. Whatever we don't feel holds us hostage. It is essentially just energy in motion that is stuck. And that energy that is holding us hostage will come out sideways. It will start to impact our physiology, our autoimmunity, and our physical self as a whole. The science is very clear, but can you share your story as to how that happened for you, what that was with the vision loss? I think people will really start to understand this on a deeper level when you share how you brought forth healing in your own stuck energy, your own energy in motion.
Yeah, I never planned to be a therapist. I never planned to write trauma books. It's funny. My mom would say, when I was very little, she'd say, "You're going to have 50 books behind you." And I go, "What about? What am I going to?" I had no, now because the book's in 42 languages,
Yeah.
different languages in the workbook. Yeah, there's 50 books on the bookshelf, which is hysterical. But yeah, I never set out to do this. It was because I lost the vision in my left eye. I was diagnosed with a chronic form of retinopathy. And, all I could see when I would look through my left eye was a gray dot. I couldn't see faces. I couldn't see anything. And I go to the doctors and they say, "Well, you have a chronic form of central serous retinopathy that doesn't go away, and we can't cure it. And we think it's stress. And one other thing, by the way, it's progressing because you have one in your right eye too. We think you're going to lose the vision in both eyes." And you can imagine, Josh, I'm pretty panicked. I'm in my low 30s and I go, "Oh, stress. Well, that doesn't help me." So I start hearing about trainings of these masters or these great wise beings on the planet. And I left Pittsburgh, where I grew up, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I left my relationship, left my job, and I go on this search that literally takes me halfway around the globe as far as Indonesia to study with these very wise teachers who teach me these fundamental principles, one of which was the importance of healing my relationship with my parents, which was completely broken. Boy, we can get into from there attachment, but let me finish with the story. So I had this broken relationship with my mom and dad. I don't know how I'm going to heal it, because before I could even look at that, I have to heal what stands in the way, which is inherited family trauma. But I have no clue what that means. But I start to look into my family history and I see that all my grandparents are orphans. 3 of them lose their mothers when they're babies and or toddlers. And then the 4th, she has her mother, but the father dies at age 1. So basically the mother is AWOL with grief for that second year of her life, that first year of her life. So I had anxiety, as I'm beginning to figure out, was the real cause of my vision loss. So I'd inherited this feeling of being broken from my mother's love, which was true. I have a massive break in the attachment. In the new book, I tell the story. I'm just going to say one sentence. She didn't want to keep the pregnancy, and for the whole 9 months, did her best to dislodge the pregnancy. I didn't write that into the first version of the book because she was still alive, and I didn't want to embarrass her. But she, so there's all this in utero trauma of doing everything possible to lose the pregnancy. So where do I go from here? I had to heal the attachment with my mom. I go back to Pittsburgh. I ask her to hold me because I want to learn what's going on in my body. She goes to hold me and I freak out. I'm so tight. I feel like a steel drum, but I have the presence of mind to say, Mom, please don't stop. Just keep holding me. And I'm staying with this utter, which I was saying earlier, we've got to stay with what's uncomfortable. I was staying with this utter painful experience of being just devoured, swallowed up, held, clutched, crunched, suffocated, just this whole thing. And I kept staying with it until something broke open, which what you were saying before about feelings was my heart. My heart opened. I was able to feel compassion for that young part of me in the womb. I was able to feel compassion for my mom, whose mom was very matter of fact because her mom was an orphan at age 2, lost both parents. So, as I started to see the whole map, because it was like a map had been laid out in front of me, Josh, and I could see going back 3 generations that everyone was a hot mess. Everybody, my mother, my grandmother, they're reactive, they're screaming, they're hitting, they're beating you within an inch of your life. This is my family that I come from. Or they'd go in the other direction. They'd be extremely cold or have really cruel words. And, both my grandmothers, weren't very good at mothering, and my mom wasn't very good at mothering. And then in that moment, Josh, here's the big thing. I realize it's not personal. I go, oh, any child coming from that isn't going to get the type of mothering that they need. So I realized that any child of an orphan, which they all are, wouldn't receive that type of mothering. Those mothers would have difficulty being present. My mother had difficulty being present. And once I got that, the emotional charge dropped. So there were a couple pieces. One was to stay with the feeling, the uncomfortable feeling, until something opened in me. But then there was another thing too. I dropped the blame. I dropped the emotional charge. All the hitting and beating and cruel words and screaming happened because my parents were just frustrated people because they weren't seen by their parents.
Yeah.
And they did to us what was done to them.
I can feel so much when you're describing this. It brings up a quote from Alan Watts that he said, we're all raising our children to raise their children, who will raise their children. He says it's all retch and no vomit. And I feel like right now on planet Earth, especially in 26, whether you're witnessing this interview now or years from now, it's all the same energy, because I think about the way in which my mother was raised. And myself being in her womb, I was born, as you know, we've done sessions with hypervigilance that still at times has a residue for me to clean. And I really resonate deeply, and I want everyone to understand this, that none of your work and none of even the understanding, whether high or low, when it comes to intergenerational trauma, is about blame or shame. It's actually, I have my pictures of my family here in the studio. So they're podcasting with us right now. Because, and I learned this from Teal Swan as well, who dovetails with your work beautifully. And she has this ancestral healing that really relates to what you're describing. Because what I get what you're describing is, it's not about holding them hostage for the things that they did not know. It's about giving them grace and compassion for the things that were so in their blind spot, Mark, that even if they wanted to heal it, they didn't have the luxury that we are afforded by your work, by the time that we live in right now, which is, now that we know, we just get to imperfectly do the work to be able to release these patterns, these unconscious patterns, these generational hooks. There's so much liberation there that I feel. There's so much liberation in not having to blame the past. It becomes an empowered fuel source that allows us to, somebody watching this right now can change their life forever. Forever. And I don't say that haphazardly. This lane that you've created for people has been pushed across the globe for a reason. It's because there's a resonance, there's a deep resonance that we all feel, that many of the things we are experiencing, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, etc., they're not always ours, but they are our loving responsibility. And that takes away all the blame, all the shame, all the charge. And then we can just go, cool, how do we step into authentic joy? And how do we end the cycle? Which is, by the way, we've rebranded the podcast. Part of your work has informed this. Now our mission, my mission on the podcast, is to be able to identify and stop the cycles and move into authentic joy. And I believe that your work is a huge part of this, because I'd love for you to expand the shame part just a little bit more. Do you find that people, when they come to you, do they fall into the shame and the blaming of the past? And as part of your work to be able to release that shame and blame for them so that they can actually move forward and do the real healing work?
I took a lot of heat for this when I wrote the book. I said, guys, we've got to heal our relationships with our parents. If we can't do it in real life, we at least have to do it internally.
Yeah.
Because until we heal that place in us, so there's no emotional charge, we're projecting our parents onto our partner, onto our boss, onto our coworkers. I mean, onto it goes deeper than that, onto our
children,
environment, our children, for sure. People ask me all the time. It's like, I'm very sensitive to smells and lights and sounds, and I go, tell me about the environment of the womb. Oh, it was terrible. My mother and father were divorced. You see, this environment gets projected onto the larger environment. But going back to your question about shame and blame, I took a lot of heat for this. And when in the reviews, when they said, Mark Wolynn makes you heal with toxic parents. And but you don't have to do it in real time. You can do it in your inner images, because I did say that. You could do it with a photo. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll have somebody, whose mom was cruel. I'll say, you know what? Do you think she's in the spirit world now? Do you think you could put a photo of this is a swan, but pretend it's a photo. Do you think you could put a photo of your mom over your left shoulder or on your left nightstand? And before you go to sleep at night, say, Mom, who's in the spirit world, please hold me while I'm sleeping so we can heal this break in the attachment, so that I can love, so I can receive and give and have a relationship. And then I have them add these words: teach me how to trust your love, how to receive it, and how to let it in. And then I even have them add these words if they were a caretaker to their sad mother, without taking care of you, Mom, just receiving. So when we heal in our inner images, the brain doesn't know it's happening in the inner images. The brain just wants the healing. So the brain is experiencing it as the real deal. It is the real deal. It's happening in actuality. Now, let me talk about the consequence when we don't heal. Okay, but let me say something first. Don't heal with your parents if you're still going home and shrinking or collapsing or becoming defensive or going into caretaking mode, because you've still got inner work to do that needs to be done before you can attempt to heal with them in person. You basically have to develop what we've been talking about all day, which is develop this inner core, this fluid place inside you that feels soft and good and expanded. Now, let me talk about the negative aspects if we don't heal this. When we are still blaming or rejecting a parent, there are 3 ways that operates unconsciously inside of us. The first way is we'll unconsciously reject aspects of ourself. We can't see when we're the same. So, for example, if our mother was cold or our father was cold, We've disowned that behavior in us, and we can't see it when it expresses on us unconsciously, and it does. So we say, I will never be cold, and then we're terribly cold, but we can't see it because we've disowned it. That's the first way. The second way is we'll pull in a partner who is cold to us, who treats us in a similar way, or we'll pull in a nice partner, but we will see them as cold. So we will be hyper vigilant, waiting for them, for the next shoe to drop. We'll be waiting for them, and we will misconstrue their actions and their words because we will hear it through the lens of that's cold. So I often say, you will turn a good man or a good woman bad with that hypervigilance.
Yeah.
And because we're pulling in a nice partner, but visualizing them as not so nice. And the third way that this happens unconsciously is we will treat ourselves, the child part of us, the way that we feel we were treated. So if our parents couldn't be gentle with us, we'll have difficulty being gentle with that child part inside us. We'll do what we believe was done to us. If our parents were critical or aggressive, we'll be self-critical or inwardly aggressive. If we feel our parents ignored us or they were distant, we'll be distant and ignore our inner child. So we cannot not do that healing, but do it where you feel safe to do it, on your own or actually in person.
When you had the healing with your vision, what was the part of younger Mark that was able to exhale?
It's such a great question. I have to think about that one. So my mom, I'm going to go back in time and remember. So I would ask my mom to hold me a lot, actually, because I hated it back then. I had a break in the bond, and I didn't trust her love because of the experience in utero. I came out not trusting it. So here I am, asking her to hold me, and I'm hating the Jesus out of it, but I'm staying with it again and again, and staying with it and staying with it and breathing with it. And, I kept doing it till I could say, oh, my mom's holding me. She really wants to hold me here. There's a sweetness in that I was finally letting myself see. Plus, I'd done a lot of the inner work where I had seen now the generational map that she's a daughter of an orphan. Of course, she's not going to be good at mothering. And her mother, we lived with that grandmother. That grandmother put so many bars of soap in my mouth. Every time I said something, I'm going to wash her mouth out with soap and stick a bar of ivory soap in. That grandmother was tough as nails. And I'm just going to tell a funny story. We could cut it later if we need to. But she would look at my mom, who's quite pretty, and say, I wouldn't call you pretty. You're an okay looking, but she was tough as nails as a grandmother. And then this is how my mother was mothered, without any emotion. This grandmother had zero emotion. I mean, you never saw any. It was flatlined and matter of fact. And anyway, I had compassion for what my mom and my dad, who had a similar mother, I could have compassion for, like you were talking about earlier, for how they were mothered. And then I had compassion for how I was mothered. And I don't know if I answered much.
You did.
But,
all roads lead to compassion. And it's something that I think is probably the hardest is forgiveness. A quote that's been said many times by many people is forgiveness isn't just a gift that you give to the other person. It's a gift that you give to yourself. So I want to speak to the people who are starting their intergenerational healing, understanding that they have inherited trauma, but yet their father or their mother or their caregiver has passed on. There's still very real, very practical things that they can do in your workbook from the book itself. Can you give a starting place to somebody that's feeling the pain, they're stuck in that cycle, but yet their caregiver, their mother, their father has passed on? They can still do just as powerful work, Mark, with the person not being in physical form.
Yeah, so I do a whole lot in my book and my workbook with that in mind, Josh. I mean, I'm always thinking, in fact, when I was writing the workbook, what I did as I put my research assistant um, on slippers, footprints, because I wanted people to have the experience of a family constellation, which is another thing I accomplish in the workbook. I find, I run the Family Constellation Institute, and that's done in a group with live representatives, but I wanted to give people that experience on their own. So I'll have my reader. I'm walking step by step with the reader. Let's go with the workbook. I do it in both books, but I'm walking step by step and guiding each step of the way and helping us draw the map, because sometimes the head needs to know what happened so the body can let go. The head needs to know so the body can let go. And it does. So I'm helping. Let's trace it. Let's hear your trauma language and trace where that really comes from or what it's really saying. Let's trace your symptom picture to see when those symptoms first arrive. Earlier you were asking me about signs of inherited trauma. There's a couple other signs too. There's it's not just when we get married. It can be we move to a new town and all of a sudden, or we move across the street, but the action of moving dredges up these familial ancestral imprints of our ancestors being persecuted and kicked out of their homeland. And all of a sudden we move and we get depressed and we don't catch why. It's because there's this resonance of what happened when other people moved. Or there's another sign that people have inherited trauma. They go to have a child. Everything's fine, but then they go to have a child and all of a sudden they're terrified or fearful that they're going to harm the baby. And if you ask them, did you ever harm the baby? They say, no. But then if you say, did someone in the family ever harm the baby? They come up with it. They go, oh my God, my grandmother was breastfeeding the baby and she fell asleep and rolled over and the baby suffocated. So there's stories like this that we've got to unearth. Or another sign, we can get rejected by our partner. And this is, I see this all the time. I was only with him for 2 months, but I don't want to live anymore. Go, whoa, back up. You're with him 2 months, but you don't want to live anymore. So we know where that's going. It's a break in the attachment with the mother. The partner represents, so that grief is taking us to an earlier grief of a child that can't remember it, but the mother was distracted, or the child was in an incubator, or you know what I mean, an earlier abandonment that is being shown through the connection with that relationship.
Question for you. What is it about the partner that becomes the quintessential healing ground? There's something very special about the partner, whether male or female, that literally mirrors back to us our work.
That's probably my favorite question in the world, because I say this in every chapter of the book, that the mother, not the father as much, the mother, and what's unresolved with her early is the blueprint, the template for the partner. So psychology lied to us when they said it's a girl and her dad. Not really. It's a boy and a girl with what happened early in utero and in the early life, the first few years of life, when often the mother is more primary as the caregiver. So these early wounds with the mother are projected onto the partner. So if she wasn't available, we're looking at the partner, waiting for them not to be available. She couldn't see us. We're waiting for the partner to not see us. She ignored us. She wasn't present. She left. We're waiting for the partner to do that. It's a straight on projection. So I use relationships as an opportunity to heal attachment, because the partner is, like it or not, the mother mirroring to us what's unresolved early.
I remember there was a comedian, I think it was Bill Burr, and he said, yeah, therapy's great. It's the place where I learned that it's all me. And I laugh at that because I've felt like that at times, right? And I love and respect my wife. We've worked together, the three of us, multiple times. We've both, as a husband and wife, gone through your work. Does this ever come up where one partner, either man or woman, feels like the burden of healing is all on them? And how would one know that the man or woman, let's say their significant other, is resisting doing the work? How does the partner
Yeah,
who's
well,
feeling like they're doing all the work bear that load, but also still claim their own sovereignty?
when we as a part of a couple haven't done our work, we feel that our partner is doing this to us. You know, you didn't text me. You didn't come home. You didn't call me. Which some of that can be precise. Some of that can be appropriate. But when there's a pattern of, I didn't text you, I was going to get, I went to the, I was away for 20 minutes, or whatever it is, when it's not in line with reality,
Mm.
then that blame that gets projected onto the partner is mirroring to the partner who could take it on and say, yeah, it's all me. I never do it right. I always get it wrong. I don't know what she wants. I can never make her happy.
Mhm.
So we definitely have to work with that piece of where that comes from, but also in the partner, the other piece of how that blame is being projected and where the root of that originates. Here's what I find. Again, I think I said it earlier, but I think I'm going to say it again. I'm the inherited trauma guy. I'm the generational guy. I wrote the book, but I spend 85 to 90% of the time working with attachment. I didn't mean to. I didn't set out to be an attachment therapist, but it is these generational wounds, a dad who cheats, a grandfather who drinks and leaves the family, set up patterns where the child will caretake the sad parent, or, that's a break in the bond. We're getting deep into some of the specificity here, but there's a break in the bond like mine where I didn't trust my mom's love. We'll call that breaking the bond one, where I didn't trust my mom's love, and then I didn't trust the love coming from a female until I was 40. So I had to do a lot of work before I could trust that nurturance, because I thought it would end or turn cruel or whatever it would do. Breaking the bond number 2, your mom is stressed out. She didn't get enough from her mother. Your dad is cheating. Your dad's never home. Your mother's depressed. Your mother has a chronic health condition. There's another energetic quality in us, the child, that begins to organize around our mother's feeling states, where we literally shelve our own self-expression, our own authentic self, to organize, to attend to our mother's needs. Breaking the bond number 2. You're not receiving if you're giving. You're not taking in and expanding, which is the task of a child. Take in, receive, expand. No, you're giving. You are sensitive to the feelings of your mother. You are sensitive to what she needs and how she's sad. And you have this belief or this feeling that I need to make my mom feel okay.
Mm.
But that never works because you're not on the same tier. It's not your job. You're a child. Your job is to receive. But many of us elevate this tier with that we can make her happy, which is shame on mom for allowing the child to do that. And for us to do that, it's a wall. It's a dead end. It's a cul-de-sac. So basically, that's breaking the bond number 2. Now we go into relationships. Breaking the bond number 2 is we go in and we're very sensitive to the other. Very, we feel, what they are feeling, but we've shelved our own needs. We don't feel our own, we lose awareness of the self, basically, because it's all over there.
So for me, the reason I'm asking you this, Mark, is because I've noticed in my own self that my podcast, first and foremost, is world-class therapy. It's world-class therapy. It's PhD level education. And the beauty of this conversation for me is that, tomorrow we're recording this the day before my birthday. And I set an intention at my birthday party. And I said, for this 46th year of life, What I learned from my 45th year was that hypervigilance does not give me peace. And what really gives me peace and what really allows me to guide this podcast and this community as we end the cycle and step into authentic joy, it starts with me. And it's really an homage to your title. It didn't start with you, how inherited family trauma shapes who we are and how to end the cycle. So I just want to say thank you for the way in which your work has impacted my life, my marriage. It is a testament to how many people have written to me, how many comments we've received. I just want to let this be a signal, a beacon, a healing signal to everybody who's been with us for this podcast today, that everything that has happened in a divine way, if I can use that language, because it happened. And so the path forward is not about clinging to the past. It's about processing and learning from the past, how we can actually be in compassion. And I just want to thank you for that, because it's been a major impact you've made on my life. We covered so much ground in this episode, truly one of my favorites. What did we miss when it comes to expression of the authentic self, and really your book, your workbook, how this model that you've created can allow us to fully step into authentic joy? Because first and foremost, we've created a understanding of who we really are as an authentic self.
So, we have to understand, what is this authentic self? For the first, often 30, 40 years of our life, we're living in strategies because we don't want to feel the terrible fight, flight, freeze responses. So we have these strategies: be efficient, be intelligent, be independent, be self-sufficient, be capable, be a people pleaser. All these strategies are the personality. They're the inauthentic self, the provisional self. So what is the authentic self? It's not being in the mind, not being in because the thoughts are always changing. It's not being in the emotions, because emotions are always changing. The authentic self, I guess for me, I would describe it as a feeling, a sensation. When we can, when we can hang out being with the uncomfortable sensations in our body, we ultimately reach beneath them. Sensations we experience as life-giving. I said earlier, pulsing, tingling, expanding, warmth. These sensations of life force that we need to practice. I always tell my clients, can you hold this sensation of goodness for about a minute and repeat it 6 times a day? If you were to ask me, Mark, who are you? I'd say, oh, Josh, okay. I like the question. Let me see. And if I just tapped into that middle place, infinity sign, Josh, I guess right now, there's, I'm in tune, as we are. We all are. We just have buffered it so we can't feel it. We all are this magnificence of life force that's flowing within. And when we can become that opens the door to creative flow. So the next part of your question, self-expression, creative flow, aliveness, vitality, comes from when we're in this inner space and allowing and waiting for it to drop in. I'm a lead guitarist in a band. So, my solos don't come from like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do over these changes?
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm going to do. I just get empty, and then I wait for my fingers to speak the expression through my core.
Last question for you today, and it's a deep one. So take a breath, y'all. The aspect of God that I struggle with most in my life, I can remember, Mark, multiple moments where I was like so angry at God. I was so angry at God for so long in my life. I said, God, why would you put me in a situation with a bipolar mother? She's getting carried out of the house on a stretcher. My dad's not around. I remember doing a vision quest once, Mark, and I said, fuck you, God. I was so angry at God. Now I've come to understand that there is a benevolent force that loves and nourishes and guides all things. But I'm curious for you, how have you reconciled, and what is your deep relationship with God at this stage of your life? How do you trust God?
Josh, I want to turn that question to you for a minute, because I think you're a great man. We don't become great with, and it's the same question. We don't become great without surmounting something great. And I believe that at some level, we don't really know cognitively what we come in with, and it doesn't seem fair, and it seems
Yeah.
ugly, and it seems painful. But it's the working through this deep trauma. People that don't have trauma aren't that interesting. So I'm just gonna say, the reason, people had everything handed to them. They like barbecues and boating and bowling. I'm teasing. Anything that begins with B. I'm teasing about that. It's mostly a joke. But they're not looking for the challenges or the depth psychology. So you are, because of this trauma that you've had to surmount. So the traumas that we have, that we've had to navigate and flow through and expand and move through, these are what we've surmounted. This for me is God in a way. I mean, I could say God is many things, but this is how we get to that divine expression of God within, that divine expression of our divinity within this life force, through surmounting what has been painful. So if we come in with a difficult upbringing, a difficult childhood, a difficult early beginnings, it's all been designed at some level, some higher level, perhaps by the part of us people call the wisdom self, the higher self, the self connected to God, however we want to phrase it. Yeah. This was the best path, including illnesses, including very difficult symptoms, complex illness. This is often the best path to learn boundaries, to learn potency, our self-potency, to learn to say no, to learn to say yes, to learn what our red light is, our green light is. Sometimes, often, most of the time, it's through our adversities where we learn to cut our teeth and build a core that we can live in.
Thank you for being my guest for the third time. The book is It Didn't Start With You. You're watching this right now on Spotify and YouTube, or you're listening in your car. If anything resonated in this conversation, trust the resonance. Trust the resonance that this path is unfolding for you in perfect timing. Mark, I have a couple thousand people in our online tribe, and every single person that comes to our calls twice a month, they are all in some way going to benefit from your work, because I think these shared patterns, these emotional patterns, these unconscious beliefs, these environmental expressions, they happen for all of us, yet they happen in these unique, beautiful ways. And so there's been so many gems on this podcast. I just want to say thank you. Let people know where they can engage with you and sign up to be on your email list and go deeper into your work.
Yeah, Josh, I loved your questions because it took us in deep places that I don't often get to talk about. So thank you for having me.
Those are my favorite places.
Me.
Yeah.
Okay. Go to my website, mostly markwolynn.com, WOLYNN. You can get my books anywhere. I love the new revised version of It Didn't Start With You. I put everything that I wanted in there, and the workbook is like working with me. So work with me.
Yes. Yeah. Y'all share this podcast with somebody who is struggling, that does not have to struggle as much anymore. So much of Mark's work has impacted my life in such a deep way. We're talking about this in the Liberated Life Tribe. So head over to liberatedlife.com. We're going to be going deeper into Mark's work. I just want to say thank you all for spending your most precious resource, which is your time. And from this conversation, I can feel that healing is not just something that's possible. Healing is right now, once you actually accept that this truth can work for you. So until we see you on podcast number 4 at some point, Mark, in the future, I'm wishing everyone love, wellness, but most importantly, I'm wishing you peace and power. You cannot have true power unless it comes from peace. We'll see you next week.